Recording in progress.
All right, good evening, everyone. Yeah, now that's working. Welcome to our regular meeting of the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee on this Wednesday, June 7th. Clerk, would you please take roll?
Osselmeyer, Bjorky,
Here.
Bond,
Here.
Camarda,
Here.
Tar,
Here.
Webb,
Here.
Hooper,
Here.
Earl,
Here.
Barnacle,
Here.
Wilkinson,
Here.
Thank you, Clerk. We will now move into general public comment. During general public comment, the public is invited to make comments on items of public interest that are within the committee's subject matter jurisdiction and that are not listed on the current agenda. Public comments are limited up to 3 minutes per person, depending on the number of persons wishing to address the committee. Time will be allocated in equal shares, totaling no more than 15 minutes. I will now open general public comment and ask speakers to bring their speaker cards to the clerk's desk if you have not already. Clerk, were there any comments received prior to the meeting?
no public comments were received.
Thank you. And at this point, I'll call on any in-person speakers who are wishing to make public comment. Were any comment cards turned in, Shelley?
No public comments received.
Okay, thank you. I will close general public comment then, and we'll move on to our first of 3 presentations. We have a long meeting tonight, a lot of stuff on the agenda, so I would just encourage committee members to please keep your comments as succinct as you can so that we can get out of here on a timely manner tonight. And so our first presentation, we are switching the order, so we'll move to presentation 2. We'll do that one first, which is a presentation from the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee's Trails Ad Hoc Committee. And this will be presented by Marcia Tarr and Jerry Wilkerson.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, and Justin, you're also presenting. Did I miss anyone else that's presenting?
No, just 3.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. This is the Petaluma Trails Ad Hoc Committee. The purpose of ad hoc trails, the Trails Ad Hoc Committee was tasked with surveying the existing trails, reporting on current conditions, and providing recommendations for improvements. We surveyed the trails and added findings to our trail survey document, which that'll be a link to that is at the end of this. Trails here are defined as off-road bike and ped routes that are not primarily on city streets and are generally found in a more natural setting or along a green belt, which is often adjacent to a creek. Our trail survey was created for the purpose of determining the location, condition, and connectivity of our trails throughout the city of Petaluma, with the encompassing goal of creating a network of bike and pedestrian lanes, paths, streets, and trails that will collectively provide safe and easy access to all areas of Petaluma. It is an ongoing work in progress. Next slide, please. Okay.
That's my slide. Surveying trails. This is kind of an odd way to present. I can't see my committee members or PBAC's committee, but I'm over here. All right, surviving trails. Our surveying trails. With our slide up here talks about connections existing and proposed. Connecting trails to other trails and to low-stress bike and ped routes in order to link school parks and places of interest has always been a PBAC goal. Connections greatly increase the interest, usability, and utility of our bike and ped network. Below, we've given some examples
of trails that you can see on this slide. The one that stands out in my mind is one that I've worked on for a long time, the Lynch Creek Trail. And it happens to be a trail that literally connects Brewster's on Water Street to the Petaluma Community Sports Fields that are east of the Rooster Run Golf Club. It's an incredible trail. If you haven't done it, I would suggest you do a portion of it, at least. But it is kind of, when I think of what a trail should be, that's my model. Not that we can't be better, but that's the base model. Currently, there are multiple trails throughout Petaluma of varying lengths. While these trails are usable and enjoyable, they are more often than not limited in use by neighborhood groups for primarily recreational use. However, by connecting these trails, we connect a network of bikeable and walkable trails that serve not only recreational, but transportation needs as well, providing a way to off-road travel from various points within the city. We have a unique geography here in Petaluma with 3 unalterable barriers: the river, Highway 101, and the SMART tracks, all of which run parallel or to varying degrees, separate Petaluma into an east and a west side. To this end, PBAC's consensus is the need for safe and usable off-road cross-town connectors. East-west, west-east. Think Lynch Creek Trail, Washington Creek Trail, and the SMART Path. And don't forget the proposed, or at least being talked about, new Caulfield Bridge. It will also provide, hopefully, a southern protected crosstown connector as well. Next slide. And Bjorn, if you can help. Do I have the map? There, that map. Yes, yep. Thank you. This is a map that Justin, who's right behind me, put together to help to better illustrate our current trail system. Note the green lines on the map. Each represents a trail or a portion of a trail. Just for quick knowledge, I'm going to see if I can name the trail, and Bjorn hopefully can show you which one we're talking about with his cursor. So the first one is Corona Creek Trail. I hope everybody can see that. The next one, as you move south, is Capri Creek. And the next one that you see that sort of veers off to the left is the SMART Trail. And then we have the Lynch Creek Trail, which is sort of mid-map. And then we have the Washington Creek Trail. That's the one right there. We have the Adobe Creek Trail. We have the Schollenberger-Ellis Creek Trail. We have the Thompson Lane Trail, kind of way out in Westridge. There it is right there. A gorgeous trail. If you've never been there, I think you should definitely go as soon as you can. A little teeny trail that's sort of next to that, which is the B Street and Elrose Street Trail. And then if you go downtown, you've got the McNair Peninsula Trails. And the one that I love that is so helpful to us is a trail that we call the Rim or the Ring Trail. That's the trail that you see at the far north end, and it goes pretty much all the way south. Okay, so by looking at this map, thanks Bjorn, by looking at this map, please note where we have gaps in this trail system. No, don't get too excited. Many of the gaps aren't gaps at all. They have connections, but the connection is just not to another on-road, an off-road trail, but to a Class 4 safe and protected route. If there is a true gap, we have noted that to staff as a broken linkage. Next slide, Bjorn.
Okay, I'm going to go over some issues we found with the conditions of the existing trails. The most important issue we found was degraded asphalt. Every trail with an asphalt surface had degraded areas. Lumps can trip pedestrians and cracks can catch bicycle tires. The edges of the trails were also crumbling in some places, which reduces the trail width over time. We recommend that the asphalt trails be redone in concrete or natural materials. Next slide. The Another issue we noticed was maintenance of areas near the trails. Low branches can be hazardous to cyclists, overgrown plants can reduce the trail width, and fallen leaves can be slippery in wet conditions. Drainage also was an issue, not as major, but there were a few trails, especially this winter when we got so much rain, that looked like that picture there. And I'll pass it back to Jerry now.
Okay, so recommendations for trail improvements. Number one is bollards. Right now, this is pretty much what many of our bollards, the existing bollards, look like. Bollards are placed at access points to prevent unauthorized vehicular access to our trails. They are made to be removable, which allows authorized maintenance vehicles and emergency vehicles access. Bollards can be made more visible by various methods, including reflective paint on the posts and yellow paint on the ground, warning of their presence. In some jurisdictions, flexible bollards have been introduced and should be considered for future use here. In situations where existing bollards are determined to be unnecessary or alternative methods are introduced, the bollards are being removed. Examples of bollards being recently removed include along Lynch Creek Trail just past Water Street, where the trail crosses the Petaluma River, and also Lynch Creek Trail at McDowell. We support the current process of removing bollards where feasible and increasing visibility where they need to remain. There may be additional on this information on this in the staff report later on the agenda. Next slide, please. Okay, I think we skipped one there, did we not? Yeah. So this is an example of markings on the bollards and also the surface paint, warning that there's a bollard coming up. Okay, now we can move on. Entrances. Curb cuts at all trail entrances. Entrances should connect to both sidewalk and roadway. Entrances should be wide enough for two-way traffic, cargo and trailer bikes, and wheelchairs. In the above example, the curb cut is to the right of the path and is aligned with the crosswalk, which you can just see a little bit there to the right. This works for pedestrians, but cyclists need to jockey around a bit and ride on the sidewalk. We don't want to do that. This could also be redesigned as a split entry or by adding a curb cut. I think you need to add a curb cut in any case. The trail on the opposite side of the street would be on the left in this picture, so it's offset. And that does have a direct curb cut. Both have unmarked bollards at this point. In this and similar situations, we would recommend surface green paint to indicate the path of travel connecting the two trail entrances and a new curb cut. So what we would have is green paint down on the road going from the one curb cut over here to this one over here, some paint over there so people know where to ride, and it kind of alerts motorists as well. Next slide, please. Okay, entrances. Okay, we did that. We talked about that. And crossings. Now, I did have something, Bjorn, there is one on entrances, I think, back one. Yeah. So this shows wide and welcoming curb cut. Most newer cuts have a tactile yellow surface. There's a different name for it. I saw in one of the other reports. It's something domes. But you've all seen that yellow bumpy surface, which is helpful for sight impaired people and also creates an awareness of surface changes for pedestrians and cyclists. Again, a bit of green directional paint, surface paint, and marking the bollards is our recommendations. Where trails cross streets, especially where street parking is typical, we recommend painting the adjacent curbs red and extending such red paint where it is currently to provide increased visibility for cyclists and drivers. And this was recently done at the Washington Creek Trail and Maria Drive. Thank you for that. Next slide, please. Crossings. Where trails cross roads, there should be an easy and direct route to the other side, along with appropriate wayfinding signage pointing out the route. Many street crossings have at a minimum white paint parallel pedestrian lines, or the preferable and larger ladder style painted crossings. There are also places such as at Lynch Creek Trail and Sonoma Mountain Parkway where the route is diverted along a sidewalk to the nearest intersection. It is recommended all crossings have at a minimum a ladder style painted ped crossing and cut-throughs where the median exists. Where possible, a direct route either perpendicular or diagonally across such streets with appropriate markings and RFBs, the rapidly flashing blinkers, is recommended. We would like to see RFBs, rapidly flashing blinkers, where bike and ped routes cross busy roadways. It should be noted that staff is aware of this and is moving in a proactive direction towards the most appropriate remedies. Next slide, please. More on crossings. There are two examples of safer bike and ped crossings. One at East Washington and Sky Ranch Road, that's right outside the entrance to Prince Park, and on the Rim Trail, also referred to as a ring trail, shown above. And another is at South Eli at the Washington Creek Trail. Staff has noted possible improvements for crossings, including better transition for larger bicycles, such as child trailers and cargo bikes. So these crossings that exist now, you can see in the picture, you come in and you do a little zig and a zag. They're good, but they are a little tight to get through. The addition of RFPs is at almost any crossing should only increase safety. It may also encourage broader use of the trail system. Next slide, please. And this is wayfinding, and this is something that we've gone through. We have some design and ideas, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that this was sent out for bid, and we received one. They backed away, or we didn't. I'm not exactly certain on that. But the wayfinding will provide signage for all our different trails, and there's an example of something what it might look like. Also, what we talked about at PBAC and wanted to include on that was a, what do you call that, a QR code, so that you could scan it with your phone and see where you are and where you want to go, as opposed to putting information on a sign that may change, and the sign doesn't change as quickly as the route may change or something. Whereas with the QR code, you can update that more or less instantly. Okay, next slide, please. And this is the last one for me here. Amenities, so lighting, drinking fountain, benches, bike repair stations. These are nice, and there are some examples of that, especially along the Rim Trail up by Weissman Park. They have some benches and drinking fountains. There are situations where we have lighting. Also along the Rim Trail, there's lighting on the Lynch Creek Trail, on the underpass under 101. The recommendation here, though, is that amenities in general could be added, but is secondary to the establishment of complete and connected bike and ped routes. And that is the focus here. Okay, next slide, please.
Currently, the city doesn't have any standards for trail design and construction. For our recommendation, we split the trails into two categories: low-traffic trails used mostly for recreation, often shorter or parallel to low-stress residential streets, and higher-traffic trails used for transportation, usually between two or more destinations. Low-traffic trails can be made from ADA-compliant natural surface materials. These trails should be 8 to 12 feet wide to allow for safe interactions between trail users. The high-traffic trails, can we go to the next slide? High-traffic trails should have concrete and natural surface paths. The section of Lynch Creek with the 10 feet concrete and the 2-foot natural paths on either side is a great example of this. Center and edge striping help avoid conflict on the trails, and lighting and reflective paint for the striping make the trails safer at night. And I think this one's you, Marja.
Thank you, Justin. On educating for safety. So our next slide has a sign up on the top, and we'll get to that in a moment. As we surveyed our trail system, we heard from the public and we witnessed some forms of interesting behavior, noticeably excessive speed, particularly on our crosstown off-road paths. So we researched Petaluma laws, trying to see if we had anything that could slow that traffic down. We found that there was none. Therefore, we looked into the creation of such a law and found that an ordinance to be created might take up to as long as 2 years. We needed something more quickly, so we found our way to the considerate trail use idea, to install signs and polite reminders on our trails. We also hoped to enlist and get the help of other bicycle and pedestrian groups in Petaluma to man the trails, and as they were on the trails, educating walkers and bikers as they traveled along. So the sign again that you see is a sample that was probably taken by, well, it could be a picture that I took on a Marin trail. The ideas there reflect bicycle rules, pedestrian rules, forming a single line when meeting others, pets on a leash type rules, down at the bottom, park or view rules. QR coding would be on this sign as well. So this is one of our ideas, would be to establish something similar to this, but of course, something that we need here in Petaluma. Next slide, please, Bjorn. And with this particular slide also came from Marin County, the trail between Sausalito and Tiburon. It uses huge sharrows, a fluorescent center line, and signage painted directly on the trail's surface, all as polite reminders. Fluorescent lines painted along each edge of the trail, so night riders could more easily see the boundary of the route. Used only on heavily trafficked trails, or those made of cement, particularly applicable to our off-road crosstown connector trails. Again, Lynch Creek Trail, Caulfield Bridge, the Smart Path, which, by the way, does use our bike facilities to close its Petaluma gaps. Next slide. This was another one of the signs. This was another example of something that I picked off the Marin Trail when I was on it. Radar-controlled speed signs let users know when they need to slow down. Speed limit recommendation sign could be attached to the same pole. Notice on this pole it says 10. I don't know whether we would want to have 5, 10, or 15, or what we would like to have, but I do think that that's a very good idea to have a recommended as well as the radar-controlled sign. And the last thing that we touched on, and we could talk about it probably for 2 days, is we really need to educate youngsters and their parents about bicycle and pedestrian safety. That is key. We would like to note that we find importance in stressing in-classroom bike and ped education for all students attending Petaluma schools. Here they might learn how to ride a bike safely on a trail, a sidewalk, and a street. How do you fix your bike? How do you adjust your brakes? How do you change a tire? Where do you go for tools if you have no tools? As a bicyclist or pedestrian, how do you walk alongside and cross streets safely? Because we have a lot of major streets that we need to have our youngsters be able to cross safely. The rules of the road, just in general. We want to promote safe routes to schools on bikes and on their feet. We are hoping to enlist partners again to help educate, and I listed a few here: Wheelmen, Bike of Petaluma, Safe Streets Coalition, Pedestrian Walking Groups, the Petaluma Police, Sonoma County Bike Coalition, and Petaluma Schools. A connection has been made with the schools, and we met with the superintendent of the Petaluma City Schools. We were a group of bike and walk enthusiasts from all different kinds of directions in Petaluma, sat down, had a great talk with the superintendent. We would love to see that group expanded to other school districts and to continue the conversations. We need to make Petaluma off-road trails safe so all of our kids can get out there and enjoy the points, going from point to point in Petaluma safely. Next slide. And Jerry?
So, in summary, the current collection of trails, with the addition of missing segments and the creation of future trails, present a solid groundwork for a network of connected and safe bike and pedestrian routes throughout Petaluma. Our connected trails, when combined with existing and planned on-road bikeways, greatly enhances cycling and walking and other alternative modes of transportation. The importance of connecting, maintaining, and signing off-road trails that are also linked to on-road surface bikeways creates an ever-improving and safer network of roads, bikeways, and trails. Combined, this is a significant step towards the city goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. And that concludes our presentation. Oh, one other thing. I'm sorry, it doesn't.
Go 2 slides.
The next slide is the map. You've seen that one earlier. And the final slide shows the various links. I had mentioned earlier our trail survey document. You can go to that and see our various inputs on different segments and different trails. And the survey map is something new. That's on the city site, I believe. Is that not correct?
No, that was the map of the pictures we took during the trail survey.
Okay.
The Google map.
There is a map on the city site. I believe that has, yeah. So anyway, you can check all of these additional resources. And finally, I would like to thank the committee members for their participation in this. And that would be Marja and Justin and Blake and Janice, who is not here, and Bruce, who is not here. And that concludes our presentation, Madam Chair.
And I'd also like to thank PBAC for establishing the ad hoc committee system. I think we did an incredible amount of research, and we have so much more that we could share. And possibly we might want to continue the trails, just because it's turned out to be much bigger than we thought it would be. But we thank you for the opportunity. And Bjorn, would you be willing to share just give us a quick picture of your map that is now on the city website, and then let's tell everybody how to access it. We have our map finally.
Yeah, so I don't have it in front of me right this second, but I do have it in my staff comment slideshow. So
Okay.
I'll have it up later. Yep.
Great, thank you. That concludes our trails. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much to all 3 of our presenters. That was a great presentation, and we can now move on to comments from the committee. Let's see, just gonna reference my agenda really quickly. Okay, so reminders, 1 of 3 presentations, so if you have something to say, please just keep it brief, and if you don't, then we'll just move on to the next person. I think we could just go down in a row, starting with you, Patricia. If you have anything, please go ahead.
Am I allowed to ask a question or just make a comment?
We can't deliberate on anything, as this is a presentation. So you may make comments or a question, correct? Yes.
Yeah,
All right, we're
yeah, I
good.
think it's a little bit-
The rules change further down the agenda. I'll remind you then.
Okay. It's just so excellent, right? The thoroughness to it all. I just want to congratulate the team that it's great. And yes, I would like to continue it, right? Because the adjustments are all the time, especially now with the wheel movement of being little wheels and faster wheels and slower wheels and older wheels and newer wheels. So, our prerogatives are going to change drastically from year to year. So I would like to always sort of have this as an agenda item, almost. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Blake, do you have any? I'm assuming, Jerry, you're not going to comment on your own presentation. Yeah. Blake, go ahead if you have anything.
I was just going to say that this really highlights the kind of fundamental partnership between PBAC and not only transit when we're talking about connecting these routes for kids, but also our school system here. I think it's wonderful to have more opportunities to have that partnership. Thank you.
My only comment is this is excellent and really thorough. The bicycle rodeo was at Cherry Valley this week, and went off really, really great. They had everybody out there. My husband learned a lot volunteering, and I think it was really worthwhile so these things are happening. We can see them happening. So nice work. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought that was a wonderful presentation, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, okay. So yeah, thank you very much for a great presentation. The one thing that I wished I had seen in the map, and maybe it exists on Bjorn's map, is how these various trails relate to schools, because we're talking a lot about safe routes to school. And it'd be great to sort of have a map, a resource for teachers and kids and families to know how their route from where they live to their school would connect to these trails, because I love the trails and I'm very happy they're there.
May I respond?
You may respond to clarify,
I
but
think-
we cannot have a further
No,
conversation.
it's just to clarify.
Okay.
I think with Bjorn's report, when he brings up the map, Kevin, you'll be able to see those connections.
Great, that's what I hoped.
All right. Love the presentation and appreciate all the effort and time that went into it. I, too, have had some wishes about trail maintenance, not so much about painting bollards, but definitely trail maintenance. And I'm not sure if it's something that we can, like, rebuilding together could do, like adopt a trail day or something like that and get out and just like, trim brush back or something. But if we aren't getting involved in, with like parks maintenance staff or something like that, it would be interesting there. And then I totally agree we need to get our kids riding our bikes more. I just wonder if if we could give like 30 bikes to a school and just have like a bike PE class or something like that and just like go on rides and things like that, because it is exercise and it's mobility, it's independence. So those are my only two comments, but otherwise, thank you so much.
Great, thank you. We will open public comment for each of our presentation items. However, I do just want to alert committee, once we close public comment, we're going to move on to the next presentation. So if anybody on the committee has anything else they want to add, now is the time to do so. Go ahead.
So one more amenity I will add to your list is trash cans, right? So just a simple, okay.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'll open public comment for this presentation. The public's invited to make comments on this item. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. If you have not done so, please fill out a speaker card and bring it to the clerk. Clerk, were there any comments received prior to the meeting?
There were no public comments received.
Okay. Or did you receive any comment cards for this item?
No comment cards were received.
Okay, thank you. We will close this agenda item. Thank you all again. This was a great presentation. A lot of tangible takeaways. I think our ad hocs are proving to be very successful. So we will move on to our second presentation, which is from the American Institute of Architects Petaluma Sustainable Design Assessment Team. We have Pete Gang with us tonight. And Pete, is there anyone else with you that's presenting that should be introduced? No, ma'am. Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you. Give me just a second. So I will start by saying I love that presentation, and it's interesting to me to see how the idea of reliance on our trails as part of our overall mobility network relates to some of the recommendations in this report. Good evening. I'm Pete Gang. I guess I'll just jump into this. If asked, most of us would say that we are in favor of progress, a better tomorrow. But what does progress mean if we don't have a clear sense of where we're headed? The city of Petaluma has made a commitment to rapidly transition toward an equitable, carbon-neutral future within 7 years, a future that we are just now beginning to imagine. Next. As a city, we need a shared vision of where we're going, a vision of what a prosperous, equitable, resilient, zero-carbon, regenerative city looks like. And to get there, we need some big, bold ideas. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of an ad hoc group of 15 Petaluma residents who came together more than 3 years ago out of our shared interest in helping our city align its sights toward that prosperous, carbon-neutral future. Next. In December of 2019, we applied to the American Institute of Architects, the AIA, for a Sustainable Design Assessment Team, or SDAT, grant to bring to Petaluma a multidisciplinary team of urban design experts to help us with some big, bold ideas. In January of 2020, the AIA selected Petaluma, one of only 8 communities nationwide, to receive a grant worth $180,000 in design services. Although the project was put on hold for 2 years due to COVID, it was revived in 2022. Next, please. In early August of last year, the AIA team spent 4 days in Petaluma to focus on the topic that we had selected. And that topic was complete 15-minute neighborhoods and living streets. The AIA team reviewed relevant documents, visited sites around town, next, conducted meetings with over 350 community members at the fairgrounds, drew maps and sketches, and made recommendations that were then presented to City Council on August 8th of last year. Next. Their final report, titled Reimagining Petaluma, was delivered 3 months later in November 2022. This presentation is a short summary of their final report with commentary by the members of our local group, the group that brought the SDAT team to our city. The purpose of the presentation, and the others that our group will be making over the next few weeks, is to ensure that the big, bold ideas that the AIA experts came up with are fully integrated into our city's guiding documents, our general plan, our climate action adaptation plan, active transportation plan, and others. The time has come to turn words into action. Next. The SDAT team of design professionals collaborated to develop a suite of integrated solutions, ones that would solve multiple problems simultaneously. Their recommendations address issues of land use, transportation, ecosystem health, climate equity, financial stability, and more. So I'll start, there are 2 categories to follow. I'll start with the first one with their recommendations for 15-minute neighborhoods. Next. What is a 15-minute neighborhood? The AIA report offers this. Next. The 15-minute city is a concept that describes a residential community with a decentralized, mixed-use development node that provides most of the residents' daily needs within a 15-minute walk from all the residents' homes. Next. Within a short walk or bike ride, I think you're one ahead of me. Within a short walk or bike ride, people of all ages and abilities living in a 15-minute neighborhood have safe and convenient access to a variety of grocery and other retail stores, coffee shops, restaurants, schools, daycare facilities, parks, playing fields, open spaces, etc., all within easy walk. This is, after all, how people lived for all of human history until a little over 100 years ago, when the automobile arrived on the scene and came to dominate the public realm. Until that time, all previous generations had lived in villages, towns, and cities that allowed older people to move about safely on their own, that allowed children to play in the street, and that fostered chance conversations between neighbors. The street was a public living room. Next. As the urbanist and writer Jane Jacobs said, lowly, unpurposeful, and random as they appear, sidewalk contacts are the small change from which a city's wealth of public life must grow. She wrote those words in 1961, but her words remain as relevant today as ever. Next. The AIA team started their analysis using what they call a 15-minute walk circle. The radius of the circle represents the distance that an average person can walk in around 15 minutes, or about 3/4 of a mile. So they started with a 15-minute walk circle centered over downtown. Next. And then, after looking at a range of social and environmental data, they overlaid 15-minute walk circles over a map of the whole city. This map shows 9 overlapping walk circles, each centered on what they call a mixed-use development node. As the AIA team said in their final report, quote, "The maps and drawings present within this section were created during our 4-day visit and are intended to be conceptual and illustrative rather than prescriptive. The intention was not to create detailed schematics, but rather to spark inspiration and a new way of thinking about these areas." End quote. Our local team has been sparked by the inspiration of the report and developed a few more specific recommendations that are informed by our understanding of Petaluma. Next. We enthusiastically support the development of 15-minute walkable mixed-use neighborhoods, and we believe that the location of the mixed-use nodes merits more careful study and community input. Cities throughout history have always grown and changed organically. Because our present zoning codes tend to discourage mixed-use development, they inhibit organic growth and change. Next. We believe it's important to encourage the spontaneous development of mixed-use neighborhoods through revisions to our zoning code that would permit limited commercial uses on parcels currently zoned exclusively residential, with uses and hours as appropriate. Next. This would reintroduce the much-needed element of liveliness, neighborliness, and community into our residential neighborhoods. Next. And again, next slide. So the next up is transportation. The SDOT team titled this section Reimagining Mobility. At the August 5th community meeting, the AIA team heard participants identify 5 key challenges that our roadway system presents here in Petaluma. Next. They heard the community voice these concerns: fragmented bikeway network, limited crosstown connectivity, motorists speeding through neighborhoods, narrow sidewalks, unreliable transit service. I mean, none of these are revelations, but it's interesting to hear reported back to us by an outside consultant what we already know and feel. The AIA team presented a big, bold fix as a, next slide, sorry. The report illustrates the big, bold fix as a green ribbon of I'm sorry, let me just go back. The first set of recommended actions in the final report is grouped under the heading Remove Barriers. Next slide, please, Bjorn. I got a little messed up there. First among the remove barriers is fix Washington Street. That was their first recommendation. The report reads, quote, "The city and its partners must fix Washington Street to meet its goals related to climate resiliency, carbon neutrality, vehicle miles traveled, connectivity, and safety." The report illustrates the big, bold fix as a green ribbon of connected corridors, a complete and integrated network that starts by transforming Washington Street and then our other 4-lane arterials, Eli Boulevard, McDowell, and others, into what they call green corridors. In this illustration, a typical 100-foot wide roadway right-of-way is transformed into 33 feet for vehicles with wide planting areas and multi-use pathways on both sides. So this is just an interesting twist or maybe a combination of combining arterials and trails instead of thinking exclusively of one or the other. Next slide. Imagine Washington Street between Petaluma Boulevard and McDowell Boulevard transformed into a green corridor like this. Next slide. The report also calls for transforming gray corridors into healthy, walkable, bikeable, resource-rich, diverse corridors. The transformed arterials would then be connected to our existing network of creekside trails to create a complete and integrated mobility network linking all of our schools, parks, playgrounds, playing fields, and commercial districts. And I'll point out that the red line going through the middle of this is 101. And you can see that they didn't really know what to do with 101. So the green corridors just end at 101. So it needs a little bit more work. And also, if you can identify where the fairgrounds is, they didn't really know what to do with the fairgrounds. But as a template, this is exciting. It has a lot of promise. Such a system is designed with consideration of the needs, not just of bicycle riders and pedestrians. Next slide, please, Bjorn. The needs not just of bicycle riders and pedestrians, but also of drivers of all types of vehicles and users of all types of mobility devices, both self-powered and powered by electricity. And then, closing down here, among the other recommendations in the final report, 3 others stand out. Next. First, the AIA team identified our street design standards as being out of step with our intentions and with current best practices. Our standards were last updated in 1996. The report says, quote, "Best practices for street design in the United States have evolved in profound ways since then, especially in the arenas of prioritizing safety for active transportation and incorporating landscaping and green infrastructure. So that's one. Next slide. Second, the report recommends improving transit reliability and frequency in order to encourage all residents and visitors to use transit rather than drive. Again, not a revelation. And third, next slide, that we create a neighborhood traffic calming program. From the report, quote, in addition to more traditional traffic calming treatments such as curb extensions and speed humps, the city should explore or continue to explore mini traffic circles, raised crosswalks, and one-lane pinch points. This illustration shows a clever and simple solution. It's just paint on pavement. In summary, based on their wide-ranging experience and the input gathered from over 350 community members, the SDAT team left us with these broad recommendations. One, we must reimagine our streets, not as the exclusive realm of the automobile, but as a place for people. Design our streets so that people in and on all types of mobility devices can get around town safely and conveniently. This will involve reducing vehicle speeds by the way we design our streets, not by speed limit signs and speed bumps. And we must include trees and vegetation in all of our street designs and reimagine our transit system to align with our vision. Number two, we must work toward the creation of walkable 15-minute neighborhoods throughout our city. We do this by allowing for organic growth and change, by relaxing the zoning rules that apply in residential zones. And we actively identify locations for the mixed-use nodes and work toward their build-out. And finally, we must ensure that these big, bold ideas are fully integrated into all of our guiding documents, our general plan, climate action and adaptation plan, active transportation plan, zoning ordinance, street design standards, smart code, and others. Next, our future for all that it might or might not be is a shared future. We're all in this together. We need to work together as a community to realize our shared vision. Next. So that's it. Thank you for the opportunity to bring these big ideas out into the public discourse. Thanks to the city of Petaluma that supported this effort, and to our strategic partners, and to all the hardworking community members who helped bring the SDAT team to Petaluma and to bring their recommendations into our public discourse. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
Next and last. So, I know that there was a lot there. I just ran right through it. I hope something in there has relevance.
Great, thank you so much for that presentation. A lot of really good stuff, good ideas. I think there's a lot of alignment and good timing as we're updating documents, and we can integrate a lot of that stuff as you were alluding to. So we can start this side with Councilmember Barnacle. If you have any questions or comments for Pete?
Yes. Thanks, Pete. I think this is the second time I've heard the presentation, but I like hearing it more from you than from the SDAT people, to be honest. So the emphasis on trees, I think, is really important, because oftentimes we're taking things like parking away from people, and trees are something that we can give people. So really appreciate the focus on that. I think there's going to be some great projects coming up and opportunities for that with Caulfield and Casa Grande in particular. Both of them are pretty wide streets, and I think those are great opportunities to remove lanes and add trees and do a lot of really cool stuff. I love the Washington idea. I think you'll if we don't find out how to message that properly, you'll wind up with a whole new council. So just gonna throw that out there. Land acquisition and incentives of how you get people to do the things you want them to do is often the challenge. I've got no shortage of people in here telling me that we should stop all new development, and then I have to remind them that this is America and we believe in private property rights and all that stuff, and we have to build housing. So the idea of the 15-minute neighborhoods, I think we need to think about how we actually go about manifesting that stuff, whether it's through incentives or when Chuck Marone was in town, he was talking about how the Japanese build train stations and they buy up all the land and then they build the train station and then they sell all the land and it's a lot higher value and that pays for the train station. And so it just makes me think is there an opportunity for the city to acquire the property that we want at lower value and then upzone the hell out of it and make profit on it that way or something. I don't know, but thing feels like we've got to be more proactive in making this stuff happen. And then a whole bunch of different weird things that I wrote down here. I think there's a lot of education that we have to do around density and what actually causes traffic. I know that my email inbox is not a symbol of what everybody is thinking, but if you combine like social media, Nextdoor, Facebook, and my email inbox, I don't think that and the fact that our community is aging right now, and I would just say that we have a lot of work to do to educate people on the importance of density and that we can't stop growth, so we can go up or we can go out, and that that's just throwing that out there, that all this stuff is great, but we've got to get people to understand the role that density plays in our future. But yeah, thank you.
Now I'm green. So I did wonder, these are suggestions based on what's visible today. So for example, upcoming developments like Oyster Cove and things along the river are not really represented here. And one 15-minute circle that was drawn was one that I think is one of the toughest areas, which is around Capri Creek, which is truly a dead zone in terms of any kind of retail or shopping, experiences. And I'm just wondering, what role does transit have in terms of the transit map? Just saying, make it more reliable, and what does that mean? I'm wondering if there were specific recommendations that there were areas that they felt were not really well served, or if that wasn't in there yet.
They didn't get down to that level of detail.
Thanks.
Thank you, Pete, for this presentation and for bringing the AIA here. And I got to participate in that workshop at the fairgrounds. It was really interesting, and I was out of my wheelhouse, but learned a lot there. I'm really curious about the recommendation around changing zoning and how the planning department feels about this, or where maybe Councilmember Barnacle, this is a conversation for council. I'm not sure where the city is on that, but I love the idea of making sure that things aren't exclusively zoned residential. And that was making me think about demonstration projects and places where we could, what could be a node. Let's get a food truck out there, get a coffee cart up, and just show people, give them a flavor of what it would be like to begin that sort of transformation. I love the reimagination of Washington Street. I always think about Chuck Marin talking about this isn't a street for people to go to Bodega and Dillon Beach. Yes, that's the way they travel, but you have a whole city that lives here, and we need to make decisions for our constituents. And I agree that the messaging is really important, but I I would love to live in a city with Washington Street looking like that. And I liked your comment about thinking about arterials and trails, because I think in my work in PBAC, I often think about designing a bike lane, get a bike lane on the road. And then I'm like, and I want permeable surfaces, like where can we have planters? But just kind of remembering to think about trail and like just the difference in atmosphere that would provide was really helpful for me. And I think in some of our prior meetings around like the Vision Zero ad hoc, we have talked about updating the street design standards. And I believe that we're operating from the updated standards, even though it's not in our current plan. So I think that that's a move that we're making, or Ken has indicated that we will. But I'm not sure if we're operating for current and new projects from the new street design standards. And then I heard at the last meeting that when possible, we're designing bulb outs for a future project of planting trees or plants, because it may not be in the cost of projects now, but I think really making sure that that's included in all projects going forward is vital. So thank you again for bringing this to us.
Great. I just have one comment. Nicole, actually, this kind of sparked something based on you talked about food trucks. I wonder if the city could create some kind of an ordinance or policy if one doesn't exist. And if it does exist, maybe some kind of incentive to get, I'm thinking about like Lucchese Park by the community center where the farmer's market is, huge parking lot, but have as kind of an anchor to a 15-minute city and having people being able to walk to an event that's maybe it's at night and there's tons of food trucks there. It's a big event, but it's really kind of marketed as, and this connects to the shopping center, the Trader Joe's. You can continue to walk over there, but just kind of create an example of what it would feel like for folks to come to the kind of a neighborhood night with food and other things. To kind of highlight that. That's all.
This was really great with the idea of the 15-minute neighborhoods. I love all of that. I can't help, first of all, I think the Washington Street thing sounds amazing, but I don't think it's doable with wildfires. I just have to be honest. We don't have exit routes in this town. It's a really major concern. I've looked at a lot of studies on it, and that would be really concerning for me. We don't have, it's not enough space to get the people out of this town. So I don't know if you guys take that into consideration, but it should be something that is looked at, because while we hope a fire never comes here, climate change is here. And so that's the one thing that worries me, other than I think that, some people would not like it because they use it as a thoroughfare. But that's the one big concern I would have with Washington Street, is that when you take away that traffic, if there is a large emergency, we cannot get out of this town. So I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but it's something that has to be looked at. I see everybody's face, but it's true. It's a big concern. So other than that, I loved it.
I think this is also maybe my third time hearing this presentation, and I love it a little bit more every time. I also have to confess, I'm biased to this because my wife was involved at the start of this, and so I think I've heard every Zoom and I've seen every email train. So a lot of this I'm 100% on board for. A few things I wanted to say. I think the point that you highlighted in the recommendation about how this has to be in our documents, I think that might be one of the most important segments to this, because while we're going to have to absolutely work on messaging all of this, just from a planning commission perspective, people don't build what they're not forced to build. What this report really lays out is how streets could be places for pedestrians, not just places for cars. And if we're going to have that kind of interconnectivity, which, looking at the one map you had with kind of the green thoroughfares going through and interconnecting different segments, I can easily see how you can message that to grandparents wanting to see their kids going to school, families wanting to buy from lemonade stands, the whole thing. I can see a community like Petaluma loving that. But in order for any of this to happen, we desperately have to make sure that true mixed use is really required, not simply implied as it currently is in the general plan we have now. I would say, according to state law, you can no longer have single-family zoning. We're going to have to change our zoning code. And if Petaluma doesn't, that'd just be egregious considering the situation we're in. So people are going to have to adjust to density, but they're going to need to look at it a little bit differently. It's not about having this horribly overpopulated city. It's about being able to see your neighbors and being able to see your family members. And what's your experience day to day when you walk outside the door, next door aside. The other component to this too is, aside from our general plan, really seeing this get implemented in our IZO, because the general plan, it is a wonderful value document. The IZO is kind of where rubber hits the road, and I hate to use a car metaphor for this discussion. But our last time we did a general plan, one of the biggest issues we had is we never finished the IZO, which is why we have so many issues in this city with projects that don't quite follow what was intended. Mm-hmm. So I do ask for the SDAT group paying attention. Once we get through the general plan, I assume most of you are probably focused on that part, especially given the changes that'll come from it. But please stay for the implementation, which is in this case the IZO component of it. It's going to be critical because right now you can have a mixed-use project and there's no housing. The simplest way to have what you're talking about is to go back to what Petaluma pioneered with its downtown. Businesses on the bottom, homes on the top. It's not the most revolutionary thing in the world. Right. I also wanted to point out on the transit thing, a lot of people here know that I will bring up transit as much as humanly possible with any chance given to me. I am so glad that was discussed. I read in the report, I love the data you pulled in concerning like the average income of nearly half of transit users being under 35,000, low income needs for transit that we currently have, where they're currently populated. One thing I would love to see the city look at, because we do need a map to look at where the transit routes are, because part of the issue we have is we have good use for what we have, but we don't have enough money to expand the route lines. And I would love to see the city look at the vehicle miles traveled mitigation, which I don't believe we have a policy yet. Love to see if those mitigated funds could potentially be used to expand public transit routes or expand our transit funds. We currently get a lot of that money from an enterprise fund, but it would be, I think, a useful way to try and make developments that fall outside of that desired goal really help fund the expansion of public transit access. And then, of course, how we connect that with our trails and with our bicycle routes. I love the fix for Washington Street. I do have the same concern about wildfires, and I also definitely hear the council member's point that there would probably be kind of pitchforks in the streets if you told the city of Petaluma that we were going to take several lanes off of East Washington without at least proposing an alternative first. So one thing I would say is, like, for that, 100% we would need to consider what are our exit routes in case of a wildfire, but also what's the solution for diverting traffic as we implement that. I think if you can provide those at the same time, people will be upset, but if they see there's alternatives and it's working, it's fine. If it's, no, trust us, it'll be better, I don't think you're gonna get as much of the public to buy in, but we'll see. I mean, a lot of this also depends on how the city develops in the next 5 to 10 years as well. On the food truck component of it, and then I will stop talking because I realize I've gone on for a little while. And this will come in my committee comment, we just actually dealt with some food truck issues. And one of the things that's popped up is we don't have a good ordinance in the city for food trucks. And I think having a better vendor ordinance as a whole to allow for that kind of 15-minute, even if it's temporary, I mean, to take the tactical urbanism approach to it, even if it's temporary 15-minute neighborhoods, it at least shows everybody what you're talking about and like, how great is it that we could have this right here? So those are most of my comments, but overall, I'm just really grateful how much you and everyone else have put into this. And I'm really excited to see where it goes. Thank you.
Hi, Pete. This is the first time I've heard this presentation, and I really
It's your
enjoyed it. Yeah.
first.
I was fortunate to attend some of the things that the group had done, like out at the fairground, and they did a 15-minute city up at a bus tour. Anyway, I'm interested on these nodes. Are these, I think you said in your presentation that they were just kind of put out there by SSTAT. But has your group refined that a bit more to maybe more specific sites?
No, we haven't really carried it any further. The SSTAT team started with the assumption that there would be no loss of housing. So they just said that they stayed away from residential. Instead, they centered their nodes on existing public property. That was an assumption that they made. So I think the next step for us would be look at possible node locations a little bit more broadly. We haven't done it yet.
Well, yeah, and if you could use some existing sites, smaller, what I guess we would call shopping centers now, and maybe add some of the component that Blake is talking about with the housing above and the retail below. And I love the idea on Washington. If you could get it through, that'd be wonderful. Transportation is, I think, is really crucial in that. And I'd like to see myself smaller vehicles that almost maybe like something like a Uber or something. The way it is now, the buses, I think, are just too big to really, and the routes are so limited. But if you can add that transportation component where it has the flexibility to get people around, instead of you have to go from point A to point B, maybe you don't want to go to B. You want to go somewhere a little bit off B. So I think flexibility in transit is very important for these nodes. And also with these nodes, there was the thing that we had done here some time ago with the bike share, which has never gotten off the ground. But if you could include those in the nodes so that then you could have connectivity between nodes along with the smaller, more flexible transit system. Seems to me that would get a lot of people out of their cars and on the sidewalks, as you say, talking to each other. Are there any examples in other cities of streets similar to Washington where that transformation took place, or similar transformation?
Can I get back to you on that, Jerry?
Huh?
Can I get back to you on that?
Okay.
I don't have a ready list. I'm sure they're
Okay.
out there. I just don't know them.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you could present something like that to the powers that be, that would certainly be helpful. Okay, but that's about it. Thank you, Pete. That was
Thank you.
really hopeful, impressive.
So, of course, it's wonderful and gorgeous and lovely, and yes, each Washington. But I think you have to teach a neighborhood how to be walkable. They don't know. Their house is designed to walk down to the car and get in the car. They don't know how to just not get in the car and drive somewhere. So that back to sort of teaching of, especially if it's just really housing. I live on the east side, and so it's like, but I laugh going, well, we have all the grocery stores on our side. It would be really easy for everybody to just walk to a grocery store, except walking to the grocery store is incompatible with safe walking, right? It's because the shopping center is designed. So I just, to try to teach people how to walk again. I was just in San Francisco and had dinner on Hayes Street, and I was just like enamored with the thousands, it felt like, people walking down the street, going to a shop, going to a restaurant, going to wherever, and just hanging out and talking with friends. But it's a city, they have to do that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just, but again, back to sort of teaching people how to walk again is,
Yeah.
so. good luck, but it's, where we want to go. It'll be difficult to get there, and let alone during an emergency, right? But if these streets are flexible to get them to be, then they should be unflexible, so if there is a master emergency, that people then can escape if necessary. That should be part of the contingencies, that you can take down the bollards and there now can be more cars exiting the city.
Can I just make one small comment? I'm not a transportation planner, but it seems to me that if we were able to reduce our 4-lane arterials to 2 lanes plus a center lane, then it would make roundabouts at the intersections more feasible. Roundabouts move traffic more steadily than signalized intersections. So I imagine that could be part of the investigation for Washington Street. That's all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pete. We'll move to public comment and then we'll close this item. The public is invited to make comments on this item. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. If you haven't done so already, please fill out a speaker card and bring it to the clerk. Clerk, were there any comments received prior to the meeting?
No public comments received.
Great. And have you received any comment cards?
There were no comment cards received.
Okay. We'll close out public comment and this item, and we'll move on to our third presentation. Before we do that, Bjorn, we're about 10 minutes to 8. We have 2 other items after this presentation. Is this presentation, is it timely and we need to do this one tonight, or do we want to consider moving this to our next meeting?
This one is timely, and I'll make it very brief.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. So with that, I will hand it over to you to present on the draft Sonoma County Trail entry and exit design alternatives. Thank you, Bjorn.
Thank you, Chair Bond, and good evening, committee members and public. So just wanted to make this item really, really quick. It was aligned with the Trail Ad Hoc Committee's excellent presentation to share Sonoma County Regional Parks' efforts to standardize and improve entry and exit points at regional park trails in the county. You may recall several of you actually attended a unincorporated county bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee meeting, I believe in last year, where they sort of initiated this effort. It was actually in response to a really tragic death on the West County Trail, where a gentleman riding with a group collided with a metal bollard and passed away from his injuries. And so in response to that, Regional Parks has taken a really close look at their trail entry and exit points. They asked W-Trans, a local transportation consulting firm, to come up with some recommendations. And this is the first draft of those recommendations. This is open for comment until July 1st. And just to clarify the role of this document, these design standards that Sonoma County Regional Parks is developing do not directly impact us here in Petaluma. We don't have any trails in the city of Petaluma that are managed by Sonoma County Regional Parks, but the city and most agencies in Sonoma County are looking to the development of these standards to kind of inform our own practices. And here at the city, we have already initiated a work order to remove pretty much all bollards on Lynch Creek Trail, and then look to continue that effort on other trails throughout the city. So it's helpful to see. We do want, throughout the county, we want to have some uniformity in how we treat our trail or design our trails. But again, we're not bound to anything that's created through this process. So I mostly wanted to share this document with the committee for your and public for your information, and encourage you, if you have feedback on regional parks efforts, you can send those comments to me and I can forward them to regional parks, or you can send them to it's Ken Tam at Sonoma County Regional Parks, who's collecting these comments through July 1st. So got a few weeks left. And I'll just kind of really quickly share the document, but again, it's available with our agenda materials. Not planning on going through this in depth. There's a sort of a description of the highway design manual guidance for bollards as far as materials, clearances.
Bjorn, sorry,
yep.
could you zoom in a little bit
sorry.
more?
Yeah, let me see here. You know what, I might have to exit this view. And again, sorry, I wasn't trying to, I wasn't suggesting that we should all go through this document together tonight. I was really just kind of trying to raise awareness around the document and then encourage people to review it on their own time and submit comments, but also happy to take any high-level feedback tonight. So, the document contains some striping guidance on, how to warn trail users that they are approaching some sort of obstruction in the trail. So that's the yellow diamond. If it's something in the center of the path, it's a white edge line. If it's something on the edge of the pathway, they've got a typical layout. The bollards, in most cases, bollards are actually installed right at the entry and exit point. The design guidance here is suggesting that they be set back about 30 feet from the entry and exit point. The bollards should be spaced to leave 5 feet of clearance. They should be placed in the center and create an even number of lanes as opposed to an odd number. So on many of our trails, you'll see several bollards in the path of travel that create an odd number of lanes, and that's discouraged in this document. We definitely agree with that guidance. And let's see what else they've got. They also, a great recommendation in here is to install curb ramps that are the same width as the trail. That's something that we are implementing moving forward. And then they've got some recommendations as well around speed control, especially for in areas where cyclists are approaching intersections, or maybe where trails have a steep downhill. And then they go into some alternate recommendations showing some different treatments that are used, including gates, speed bumps, chicanes, which are these just adding some curvature, and then also splitting trails at entry and exit points. At a high level, I'd say our approach at the city, I think what we're shifting towards is adding striping consistent with what's recommended here, removing bollards where we don't anticipate issues of vehicle encroachment on trails, and then adding them in if we do encounter that, and definitely improving our trail entry and exit points with curb ramps that are easy to that are accessible for people walking and biking, and also again match the width of the trail. I don't know that I have much beyond that, so I'll just stop there, and happy to, if you have any questions or comments.
Great, thank you, Bjorn. If any committee members have a comment or a question, you can just raise your hand. Kevin, go ahead first.
Thanks, Bjorn. I haven't read this in detail. Do they have any commentary about areas where trails break and join motor traffic and then continue? Because that's true, for example, on the Joe Rodota Trail when you get over by Andy's Market, and then it cuts over, and there's a similar one, I think, on the other side of Grayton. Do they have any guidance about that, since we have been talking about trail connectors here tonight?
They don't. In this document, this is really looking more at the signage and markings and vertical elements, but I think we've identified, the committee has identified, and we've identified a need to improve the legibility of those connections through wayfinding, and in some cases by creating new at-grade trail crossings where our trails hit streets and we don't have a crossing. The example that Jerry shared earlier, where you've got a trail that dead ends at a sidewalk, a crosswalk to your right, and then a trail again to your left. That's a great example of an area where we would want to line up the curb ramps, or if we can't line up the curb ramps, figure out a good connection between the two, point A and point B. Yeah, not send people out of their way.
Patricia?
How fast is this going to happen of converting everything so that it's one bollard or yellow corrections around it? Is it 6 months? Is it by next summer?
So right now we don't have we started with Lynch Creek Trail because that's obviously our most used trail in the city. And it's that work order was given to our maintenance crews that have a very long list of things to get to. So it'll be, I think we're going to just kind of feed them these work orders over time, and they'll get to them basically as their bandwidth permits. I think there's an opportunity if we feel like we need to do some sort of more comprehensive citywide project, then it could be a CIP project where we potentially bring in outside help to do an overhaul of all of the the trail entry and exit points. But for now, what we're doing is we're just we're doing it through our work orders with our city street crews. So I don't have, sorry, that was a really long-winded way of saying I do not have a timeline.
So is there any way that there could be volunteers help? The police department has volunteers help them do things. So why can't the city maintenance have volunteers help them?
In most cases, these bollards actually have, they're embedded pretty deep in the ground, and there's a lot of different ways that they're installed. But I've gone out and looked at pretty much all of them on the Lynch Creek Trail, and they'll have to basically cut, there's a sort of a pipe in the ground that's receiving the bollard, right, and holding it in place. That will have to be cut, sawed down flush with the concrete, and then the hole will have to be filled in with concrete, so that we're not introducing a new tripping hazard in the trail. So that's not necessarily volunteer work. That's a little more labor intensive. And I can't think of a single bollard I've seen that won't involve that type of work. We don't really have any that are just like surface mounted. So,
But, we can do paint. We can do maintenance. So I just, Okay, thank you.
I have seen a proliferation of graffiti on the Lynch Creek Trail. That might be a great way to do a great place for some volunteer efforts.
All right, I don't see any other hands. Okay, one more.
You got me with the graffiti. I know there's Rebuilding's trying to do a graffiti program too. So maybe a couple of volunteer efforts to sync up with Drake at Rebuilding. So
Yeah, that would be, we'll get the word out if we can get something going there. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we will move to public comment for this presentation. Public is invited to make comments on this item. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. If you have not done so already, please fill out a speaker card and bring it to the clerk. Clerk, were there any comments received prior to the meeting?
No public comments were received.
Great. And did you receive any speaker cards?
No speaker cards were received.
Okay, we will close out this presentation item, and we will move on to item 4, approval of minutes. Does anyone on the committee have changes they would like to request to the May 3rd, 2023 meeting minutes? Okay, we will approve the minutes without any changes. I'll close this item and we'll move on to item 5, which is a recommendation to authorize the chair to provide a letter of support for the city's applications to the U.S. Department of Transportation's Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program for the citywide intersection and crosswalk safety improvements project and Lakeville Corridor multimodal improvements study. Bjorn, you picked a very long title for that one. Okay, I will hand it over to Bjorn. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, as you were reading that out loud, it occurred to me that's a bit of a mouthful. We're trying to avoid acronyms here, right? Yeah, I'll jump right into this. The Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program is a relatively new funding source that is administered by the U.S. Department of Transportation. It originated, I believe, last year, and really emphasizes funding planning efforts and now implementation and projects to prevent deaths and serious injuries from traffic collisions. And it's very much focused on addressing or helping implement projects identified through Vision Zero planning efforts as well as local road safety plans. The funding, the criteria prioritizes relatively low-cost improvements that have high impact and that improve safety over a wide geographical area. So Sonoma County Transportation Authority is coordinating a countywide application, and they issued a call for projects in late May. I remember I shared it with you at our last meeting in my staff comments that we had just heard from them. But there was a really quick turnaround to submit an application by May 24th. So unfortunately, that didn't allow for us to come to PBAC prior to submitting our application to SCTA. And SCTA's guidance stressed, like the U.S. Department of Transportation, they stressed low-cost projects that would use proven countermeasures and really emphasized that they wanted us to pull projects out of the Sonoma County Vision Zero action plan, high injury intersection and high injury network maps, and also to rely heavily on our local road safety plan, which identified several priority corridors and intersections, very consistent with what was identified through the Vision Zero action plan. So we took, as staff, we took a really close look at the high injury network and at our local road safety plan. We looked at the grant criteria. We had a couple of calls with SCTA staff, and we came up with 2 projects that we thought were a really good fit that would deliver a lot of value for the city's efforts to eliminate deaths and serious injuries from traffic collisions. So the first one was our citywide intersection and crosswalk safety improvement project. Looking at the most recent 5-year collision data from 2018 to 2022, we know that over half of all reported collisions and over half of all reported collisions resulting in a severe injury or fatality, as well as 68% of reported collisions involving people walking or biking, all occur within 100 feet of an intersection. So that's the majority of our collisions, including those that are involve serious injuries and people on foot and bike, vulnerable road users, are happening at intersections. So this project really aims to address that at a systemic level. We submitted a $4 million request, or a $4 million project that there's a 20% local match, so it's a $3.2 million request. And it would really, it would address all 14 high injury intersections identified in the Sonoma County Vision Zero high injury network, as well as all 9 priority intersections identified in our local road safety plan. So what we would do is basically we would address almost all of the city's busy intersections in some form. The first series of improvements, we have about $2 million in the project to install quick build bulb outs and upgrade signage and markings at all intersections and crosswalks on our arterial and collector roads. We have a little under $500,000 to add flashing beacons to uncontrolled crosswalks on arterial and collector roads. And we've actually made a really good dent in this through some efforts over the last several years. You know, if you've probably seen on East Washington, most of the intersections, if not all, now have rapid flashing beacons. And so there aren't actually too many of these left, but there are still some, and we'd like to hopefully get through the rest of the list of uncontrolled crosswalks and add enhancements. And then lastly, pulling from our recent very competitive but unsuccessful application to the Highway Safety Improvement Plan earlier this year, or improvement program, excuse me. Earlier this year, we would upgrade our we have about 35 traffic signal controllers left that need to be upgraded to allow for improved signal phasing. And we can do a lot of really innovative things with better traffic controllers, such as leading pedestrian intervals, which give pedestrians a head start at, the pedestrian gets the walk sign before vehicles get a green light. It would allow for us to do things like no right on red. It would bike signals. So that could be a game changer for a lot of our signalized intersections. And then it would also allow us to upgrade our traffic signal hardware. An example being just adding those reflective back plates shown here, which has a pretty significant crash reduction effect from data that the Federal Highway Administration has prepared. It would allow for improved pedestrian countdown timers, push buttons, better signal heads. So yeah, would just make overhaul a lot of our traffic signals. The second request was for a planning study on Lakeville Street and Lakeville Highway. So we're looking at both city right-of-way between Petaluma Boulevard North and US 101, as well as Caltrans, the Caltrans portion from US 101 to city limits. And I think probably no surprise to anyone on this committee that Lakeville is one of, if not our highest injury corridor in our network. It accounts for 14% of all of our collisions citywide and nearly 1/5 of all collisions involving a severe injury or fatality. So this request is for $250,000 to examine existing conditions along Lakeville, engage the community and all of our partner agencies that would be involved in this project, namely Caltrans, and develop near, mid, and long-term recommendations for improvements along Lakeville, across Lakeville, but also looking at some of those lower traffic parallel routes that might be available for people traveling by foot or bike. And we do want this plan to be implementation oriented. We do not want to produce a study that just collects dust and sits on a shelf. So key to this would be identifying implementation strategies for all of the recommendations, including partner or agency roles. So this would help us really engage Caltrans and identify what they would take care of through this plan, and then identify what the city could take care of. And again, not just looking at long-term recommendations, but most importantly, looking at what we can do in the near term to improve safety and connectivity. And so something not included in the presentation, but noted in the staff report, the city would also benefit from SCTA's planning activities that they're applying for in this countywide application. They have a request of around, I believe, $850,000 that would support efforts, including the vision, an update to the Vision Zero data dashboard, implementation of safe routes to schools task forces throughout the county, and also an action plan that helps guide cities on how to implement Assembly Bill 43, which is the new legislation that allows us to establish lower speed limits without relying on the 85th percentile. So in addition to the projects that we've put forward as a city, we would benefit from SCTA's projects. And with that, just closing, there's our staff recommendation to authorize the chair to provide a letter of support for the city's applications. And the next steps, so this application will go, or the countywide application will go to the SCTA Board of Directors for their authorization on June 12th. Applications are due to the U.S. Department of Transportation July 10th. We expect to hear back in December, and then the funding would be available starting in September 2024 if we're successful. And with that, happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you, Bjorn. So now if anyone has questions specifically, not comments, we'll get to that, but questions. I just raise your hand. I don't know if we're going to have a ton of questions. Go ahead, Patricia.
So you talked about the list of uncontrolled intersections. Is there a list that's been given to us recently? Is that a question? Can we have that list?
There is not. That list has not, was working on updating that recently. So yeah, we can report back with that list.
Okay.
We'll need to finalize.
And then,
need to do that for this application anyhow.
Okay. And then second, in the Caltrans upgrading with Lakeville and that decision, is sweeping part of that list of talking? Okay.
Yeah, so we can look at, it could include maintenance issues, although that's something that doesn't need to wait until a planning study in September of 2024. Those are the types of requests we can put forward right now, so.
And Caltrans will do it?
We can, depending on the nature of the request, we can put forward different. I'm also not 100% familiar with all of the different, Caltrans and the city have different roles as they relate to the management of the state-owned portion of Lakeville Highway. So yeah, I would just reach out and we can figure out who's responsible for what and try to make it happen. Yep.
Councilmember?
Yeah, question. Can you talk a little bit about the evaluation criteria and how you think we'll fare on that?
Our application, from our perspective and our read of the criteria and from SCTA's and SCTA staff seems very competitive. It will be really interesting to see how the county-wide application is evaluated, though, because my understanding is that we'll be evaluated as a package of projects. And I haven't heard whether they would pick and choose among those projects, whether the countywide application would receive partial funding or if it's a all or nothing type deal. SCTA staff has not been able to clarify that yet. I'm not sure. The overall request for the county was capped at $25 million. So our request accounts for a little over 4 million of that. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses.
Okay, I don't see any other hands, so we'll go to public comment and then we'll come back for any committee comment. The public is invited to make comments on this item. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. If you have not done so already, please fill out a speaker card and bring it to the clerk. Clerk, were there any comments received prior to the meeting?
There were no public comments received.
Great. And have you received any comment cards?
No comment cards.
Okay. I'll close public comment on this item and bring it back to the committee. So we will need to vote on this item. So if you have any other comments or questions for Bjorn, and if not, then if someone wants to make a motion, you're welcome to do so. I'll just add, please echo verbatim the language that's on to make it easy on Shelley, if that's what you're recommending. If we could just copy exactly what's on the agenda.
In the subject line.
Yes, in the subject line. So any other comments from committee members? Go ahead, council member.
Yeah, if there's any support that would be helpful from the state, like our state representatives for the Lakeville stuff. I'm just thinking about like anything that we could get to show that they're concerned about it too. Let us know. I'm happy to reach out.
Thank you. Yeah, we will do.
Go ahead, Blake.
I just wanted to say personally, as somebody who drives Lakeville every morning, thank you for prioritizing Lakeville with this study. I think I've probably been nearly hit by a truck at least 3 or 4 times in the last year alone. So anything that can be done to try and make it a safer pass-through area is very much appreciated.
I was going to make a motion.
Please.
All right, I will make a motion recommending to authorize the chair to provide a letter of support to the city's applications to the U.S. Department of Transportation's Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program for the citywide intersection and crosswalk safety improvements project and Lakeville Corridor multimodal improvement study.
Beautiful. You get a round of applause for that one. Do I have a second?
Sure, I'll second it. Oh,
Okay, Shelley, either one, Patricia or Blake. And with that, were you going to say something, Shelley?
I already put Patricia down.
Okay, sorry, Blake. Clerk, would you please call roll?
Bjorke,
Yes, I vote yes.
Bond,
Yes.
Camarda,
Yes.
Tar, Webb,
yes.
Hooper,
Yes.
Earl,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Aye.
Wilkinson.
Yes.
Okay, with that, I will close out this item. I'm amazed how we're not doing that poorly on time, so good job, everyone. Hopefully I didn't just jinx us. We'll move on to item 6, receive a presentation and provide feedback on proposed Safe Streets nomination program. I will turn it over to Bjorn.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, we are cruising along tonight. All right, so the Safe Streets nomination program, when it was last presented to PBAC in January for your feedback, just really to introduce the topic, it was actually presented as the neighborhood traffic calming program, and we have since expanded the sort of tried to make it a little bit more inclusive of projects that maybe A, aren't necessarily in a neighborhood, and B, aren't necessarily just traffic calming. So hence the name change, Safe Streets. Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen, am I? 1 second. Hence the name change to Safe Streets Nomination Program. And what this is a proposed, a new program for the city that would enable community members to nominate streets for traffic calming or safety improvements. The goal is to create something that is accessible, so all community members know about this, they know how to access it, they're clear on what its goals are, and something that's transparent. It becomes, we want to make it very clear to people how and why projects are selected for implementation, And also we want something that's data-driven so that it prioritizes streets with the most pressing speeding and safety issues for our resources. So the staff report that you received outlined in greater detail the process, the nomination form, and the scoring criteria, and I'm just going to run through each of those here at a slightly higher level. So the proposed process, we would basically, and I'll go into, I'm sorry, I just mentioned that I'll go into the scoring criteria in a moment. But at a high level, the process, we would receive applications on a rolling basis. There would not be a deadline necessarily, but for consideration in the following calendar year, applications would need to be submitted by August 31st. When we received the applications, we would do a preliminary review and screening, make sure they are eligible and appropriate for the program. Really, the only eligibility requirement that we have outlined thus far is that projects shouldn't be on arterial roadways. But there's room for interpretation with that. I think when we receive these nominations, there might be different places or different things that we can do with them. So even if a nomination isn't applicable for this program, we might be able to take some requests and generate immediate work orders to generate immediate fixes without having to send them through this process, or add them to a list for an upcoming CIP project. So for example, if we have a paving project coming up and we receive a request, maybe it's better to fold it into that paving project. But that's really what the screening stage aims to do, is identify whether to advance the project within this program, as it's outlined. So next up, we would collect data. So that includes collision data and speed data. And then we would score and rank the projects. The project would then go through a design process. If it's identified as a high-scoring project, that's likely to move forward. Projects that involve more significant changes would likely require more community engagement. So if it's a project that involves a major changes to operations, such as traffic diverters, or maybe even a traffic circle, if that's seen as an extreme or potentially controversial measure. Parking removal, if it's more than just a handful of spaces for intersection daylighting. Those are the types of projects that may require a little bit more extensive engagement during the design process. And then lastly, projects would be installed in score order as resources allow. And we would be rolling over all unsuccessful nominations to the following year. So there would definitely be an opportunity for unsuccessful nominations to be implemented in the future. And all throughout this process too, we would be sharing all of this information and engaged with our police department. So while this program, as I'm describing it, is really infrastructure focused, we're looking to make engineering fixes to our streets to improve safety. Police would have all of the same data. So they're going to see the collision data, the speed data, they're going to see our scores, the requests, and they'll be able to allocate their enforcement resources accordingly. The nomination form would be available in English and Spanish, both online and in person at City Hall and the Community Center. And it's very simple. It's included in the staff report, but includes just basic contact information, information about the issues that the community member is observing. And then lastly, this is optional, but evidence of neighborhood support. So an opportunity to identify if the person is submitting on behalf of a neighborhood group or HOA, cool block team, and also an option to upload documents such as petitions or other letters that demonstrate neighborhood support. So again, those are not required, but could be helpful, especially if there's a there's a project that may be a little bit more, that may involve more extensive changes. And then lastly, the proposed scoring criteria that we've outlined. So again, we're taking a combination of collision history and speeding to establish a baseline score. And then we've got a slight multiplier for projects that are located within a quarter mile or half mile of schools and parks, which is consistent with some of the feedback we received from PBAC in January. So running through just quickly through the collision history on the left there, basically the points, higher points are given to streets that have collisions involved, especially those involving injuries and those involving people walking and biking. And this was really designed to try to support our goals around Vision Zero, eliminating deaths and serious injuries from traffic collisions, and also our goals around mode shift and creating a more walkable and bikeable city. The second column there addresses speeding, and the way this is described, or the way this is captured here, assumes that we would be going out and collecting a 1 hour radar survey. Although we've recently been looking very closely at big data sources that actually could give us insights into speeds at a citywide level with a fraction of the staff time involved. And so we've actually got some reports coming, and we're going to be looking into that as a source. Essentially, there's a company called Streetlight Data. I know Pete is very familiar, and they take data from cell phones and onboard navigation systems on cars, and are able, at a very high level, they're able to aggregate traffic volume on streets on a block-by-block basis, speeds, so we can look at average speeds, 85th percentile, we could look at outlier speeds, we could look at the percentage of vehicles traveling over the speed limit, and also allows us to do cut-through assessments and see what routes people are taking to get around, whether or not people are using streets as cut-throughs, essentially. So that criteria may change a little bit depending on the source of the data. We'll have to figure out the best way to basically capture speeding issues through Streetlight, if that's the route we go. And then I already mentioned the multiplier that we would apply from columns 1 and 2 if the projects are located within a half mile or quarter mile of a school or park. So with that, our goal is to roll this out within the coming weeks, and this is a test. We want to implement, evaluate, refine. Nothing is totally set in stone. We want to. It's going to be a process. We're going to learn a lot when we do this, and definitely want to be adaptive as we learn more. And we also, high on the list to hopefully roll out in tandem with the program, is a quick build traffic calming and safe streets toolkit that would help educate community members about the different types of treatments that we are using to slow traffic and improve safety on our streets. And that would also just assist with, as neighborhood groups, cool block teams are thinking about what types of improvements they want to see in their intersections and streets, they can start identifying those that may have greater support or maybe more appropriate for their situation. So with that, I would love to take questions and receive your feedback, and we'll continue to report back to PBAC on this as we roll it out and make those adjustments. Thanks.
Thank you, Bjorn. So we will, just like our last item, questions only. Then we'll do public comment, and come back for any other comments that the committee has. Patricia, I can start with you. We can just go down the line if you have any questions.
So the neighbor that reports it has three options: to go to online, city hall, so a paper. So are you following up with the neighbor that reports it to say, yes, we received it? And then if it gets, I don't want to use the word rejected, but you roll it over to the next year, are you telling them that you're rolling it over?
Yeah, so there
Okay.
would be, I think the goal is to create some sort of living document on the city website that lists all the requests we're receiving and shows their score and ranking, so that that's available to everyone, and including the person who submits. And yes, we will definitely, our goal is to maintain a dialogue with those who request improvements.
Okay, that was the question. Okay, thank you.
In terms of posting, did you also consider sources like Nextdoor or any community forums as well?
Yeah, so I think there'll have to be a pretty widespread communications effort to get the word out about this as we roll it out. And the city's communications channels generally include social media, Nextdoor, the community update, email bulletin. So, yeah.
And then just for the scope of this program, I understand that a lot of this is them kind of self-identifying what kind of concerns they want mitigated. Is there also opportunity with these forms for them to mark other transit needs that might be adjacent to their concern? Not necessarily because it'll be rectified, but because it kind of provides the survey opportunity. And part of that, in my thinking, was, well, it'd be great to get a sense of who in residential communities, while they're talking about calming traffic, is also wondering, hey, it'd be great if we had a bus stop, or if we had, starting to collect that data as they're presenting or providing their traffic calming requests.
Yeah, so there is, I think there's an opportunity to, we definitely want to elevate the report at issue page, because in many cases, there may be issues that can be addressed immediately through a work order, right? Mm-hmm. If someone observes some sort of hazard or other issue, that we can send a crew out to take care of. As far as, I don't know that there's an easy way to solicit feedback on kind of tangential improvements, but maybe if there's some sort of I don't know, I'm a little worried about the staff time involved in responding to these requests as it is, but we could possibly explore just adding other information to the page to kind of funnel other requests to the appropriate city teams. But if you have, if you have categories of the types of improvements you think would come up often, that would be helpful to know.
Right, because I wasn't thinking in terms of, and I get this is veering into comment territory, so it would be very brief, but I wasn't thinking in terms of forcing staff to have to reply with like, hey, the bus stop's 4 miles away, or, that sort of thing. But since we're talking so much about how we have multimodal transit and talking so much about, and I saw that in the goals for this, I think this is absolutely wonderful. I think this is might be the second time an iteration of this has popped up, at least in the last year and a half to 2 years. I was just thinking, you're collecting that information. It's great to get a sense of, while people are talking about, hey, I've got cars running straight through my neighborhood, it's that kind of reminder of, oh yeah, I don't have easy access to this. And that's a valuable thought to be instilling in the public. So I was just wondering if that would be too far outside the scope, even if it's not something that gets responded to right away by staff, because it's just a checkbox.
Yeah, there could be, maybe through an open comment box that just says anything else you want us to know, and then there's a way to kind of collect that data, that input, and pass it along to the appropriate city department could be an idea. From oftentimes I think a lot of our community members do take every opportunity and every touch point between city staff or with city staff to kind of to raise some of those other issues. So that's great suggestion.
I have one question. Does the city have any sort of a plan? This is being implemented, but does the city have any sort of plan to almost make some of this not necessary? For example, by schools where there are traffic areas, to just already put the markers on, put the bulb out by every single school to mitigate some of, because I feel like this is staff time too. Is that a plan that you guys have in place?
Yeah, I'm really glad you raised that. So, I mean, the presentation that I just gave on our application to the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, that would address, if we're successful with that, that will address most busy intersections along arterials and collector streets. So along our busiest roads, that'll cover hundreds of intersections. And that's where we're definitely trying to take every opportunity through our paving projects and through these grants to basically kind of standardize that level of safe and slow design into our street projects. So this is really meant to be kind of a catch-all for everything else that's community driven. Where we are looking, again, when we have a paving project, we're going to look at all these types of improvements by default. So this is really meant to capture the stuff that maybe we don't have an upcoming project, and there's neighborhood has really identified a need for something in the near term.
Great, thanks.
Great, I have a couple questions. Will the list, as you receive the project requests, be public on the website so people can see where they fall and so they can see what other folks have also recommended, is one question. Will you plan to leverage the person who submitted the request? I know there's an option for them to upload like signatures they got, but will the city, if maybe they don't get a list of signatures, leverage that person who really championed, they want this thing, to engage their neighborhood, so that kind of takes some work off of city staff, that person can kind of champion and get the immediate neighbors engaged? And third question, is there an opportunity to add kind of bonus points through how does the project align with equity goals, with active transportation project priorities, and any climate mitigation if there's an area that floods a lot, or whatever it might be? Is there an opportunity, could we add kind of bonus points for the climate perspective?
So to your first, all great questions. To your first question, yes, I can't say exactly, we're entering uncharted territory with this, so I don't know what kind of bandwidth this is going to take to manage, and we also don't know what kind of volume of nominations we'll receive. But the goal is to be very transparent about the applications we're receiving, so people do understand how their project or how their nomination ranks relative to the others we scored. So that would be achieved by keeping a pretty updated list on the city's website for all to see. Sorry, I think I remember your third question. Your second question.
The second was on leveraging the community member who had submitted. Yeah.
So that's something we've talked through a lot. We currently have it in there as optional to upload evidence of support, and there's language included in your staff report that sort of, I think, encourages it as a way of potentially streamlining the design and engagement process, especially for more extreme changes. But we don't want to make it a requirement, because there's definitely there's some equity concerns there if we're if we're adding another potentially barrier to this. And, if someone's not comfortable talking to their neighbors or doesn't have the time or bandwidth to talk to their neighbors, we don't want to make that a requirement necessarily. And then to your last question of improving or potentially increasing scoring around equity, active transportation, climate, that's great thoughts. And I think we can, if this committee thinks there's value in adding some sort of geographic component to the multiplier score, we could definitely consider that. I know that's something that we've struggled with in the past a bit. When we came to you recently to discuss the active transportation plan prioritization criteria, and it's outside of the environmental justice maps produced through the general plan update effort. It's not, all of our equity data or our data for disadvantaged communities in Petaluma is at the census tract level, and it's not. I think there are concerns with how accurate it is, or whether it's sufficient for this type of appropriate for this type of application. But I'm sorry. I'm really, again, we're here tonight to get your feedback. So
I just have a follow-up question to my second question.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, not at all recommending we make it mandatory. That is an equity issue. I would not want that. But if the city is going to move forward with a particular project, will the city, work with that person who submitted it, the request, whether or not they have signatures, and see, are they interested in being in being a community champion, or in some capacity being a champion to engage their neighborhood? Not as a requirement, but just, potential opportunity if that person is interested.
Yeah, I think we never want to put too much of a burden on our residents to go out and do that kind of legwork. But I think there are ways we can suggest it, encourage it, especially kind of maybe something to explore on a case-by-case basis, honestly. If we have a really, if we have a project that's very controversial, or where the neighborhood is not necessarily aligned behind the proposed countermeasure, there could be there will probably need to be some additional engagement from the city. And yeah, I think it's a difficult question to answer, honestly, because I think we need to just get into this and see how it goes, honestly. Don't really know what to anticipate as far as local or neighborhood level engagement on these projects.
My question is about the Safe Streets Toolkit. Like, it says it's educational, and I'm just wondering how practical it is, or how much it acts like a quick build program. If you could give me some examples.
So yeah, I think what we're envisioning is just a living document that has illustrations and very brief descriptions describing what types of countermeasures we've used in Petaluma, and drawing out from outside Petaluma and looking at other cities and best practices, so that people have a sense of what's possible on their street. There's really simple stuff from like intersection daylighting. It's a red curb within 20 feet of an intersection. But if we're talking about traffic diverters or chicanes, there's definitely, it would be really helpful, I think, for people to have a sense of what they look like, what they do, what they are intended to do. So yeah, really.
So it's kind of like a glossary.
Yeah, but hopefully a little more user-friendly.
Okay.
digestible, more interesting. Kevin, do you have questions?
So this maybe loops back a little bit to Patricia's question about the potential rollover from year to year. if something has gotten far enough along that it seems like it's going to happen and then gets rolled over, does it just fall back to, or does it become first in line for the next year, or does it go into the general pool of suggestions? And you could make the argument for either case, I guess, but I'm just hoping that it would be very clear to someone who submits, as if let us say that you're not really involved, but you suggest, I don't know, that there's a second ice cream sculpture in the middle of the street. I don't know. But if it doesn't happen, do you know that it is still in the list, right? I just setting a public expectation. That's
Yeah, well, no, I think we'll be clear from the outset that when we receive a nomination, it gets rolled over from year to year, and so we will have a.
But it gets rolled over as a suggestion again, so
it will not necessarily be
the
prioritized.
brink of step 5, shall we say?
Yeah,
it goes back to step 2 or something.
It
doesn't just become the first in line for the next year.
No, it wouldn't necessarily become first in line. It would be that would really be dependent on where it scores relative to the rest of the nominations.
Councilmember Barnacle, do you have any questions?
I think I'll just hold it, just ask them in the form of comments.
Sounds good. Okay. We will move to public comment on this item and then come back to the committee for comments. Public is invited to make comments on this item. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. If you haven't done so already, please fill out a speaker card and bring it to the clerk. Clerk, were there any comments received prior to the meeting?
There were no public comments received or speaker cards.
Okay. And have you received any speaker cards?
There were no public speaker
Okay.
cards received.
Okay. Great. We will close out public comment and bring it back to the committee. So now you can comment away, but try to keep it brief still. Do you have anything? All right. Jerry?
Yeah, this sounds like a very ambitious and ideal, I think, program. I hope it goes successfully. I would suggest small steps because I see a lot of opportunity for success and equal number of opportunity for pitfalls. I think there was one point brought up about one neighbor wants one thing and the next neighbor wants the exact opposite, and they both supply appeals or whatever it is you would call it. I just see a lot of opportunity for her. So I would just recommend a lot of caution and small steps in proceeding with it. The potential too for engaging neighborhoods and people with each other is huge. So it's well worth the effort. I wish much success with it. That's it.
I think this is going to be, I'm hoping this is going to be a very effective program for the city. And I think it's also a prime example of the kind of traffic programming that especially residents in Petaluma are looking for. Next door is a great place to complain on, but sometimes it feels like there's no place to go when you're seeing somebody burn through your street at 50 miles an hour, whatever it might be, just skidding through, and you're worrying about kids or what have you. I'm very glad that this avoids feature creep. I definitely think that for this to work, it's really got to fixate on not only its intended purpose, but also consistently displaying the success. I think there's a really great opportunity here once the first few projects get going, where you can start doing before and after social media posts, where you can start doing stories and reels, really showing people that sense of, hey, I submitted my request, it made it through, look what they did. And mind you, for some of these, that means that it's going to be the ones that are the easiest to do, but still, look, it got done, it's getting done, the city is being responsive. I'm also grateful that this considers the economic equity issue and doesn't require the activism. there's pretty much not a single thing in government that doesn't require the public to put more activism into it than they should, or that they should have to. I know we live in a post-Prop 13 world, so a city like Petaluma just doesn't get the revenue it should have to do all of this on a regular basis. So projects like this become necessary. So it's great on one hand that they'll have a tool where they can just go, here's the problem, submit it to the city, scores well, great. I think it's almost criminal to force people to have to go organize their neighbors, take the time when they probably don't have the time to go through and do this when it's just objectively probably the right thing to do for that street. And obviously you're gonna have city staff looking at that and scoring it. Just a few brief things. In terms of the multipliers, I love that it's a force multiplier for both schools and parks. I would also add family resource centers to that list. Usually those are associated with schools, but not always. And this could be a little vague, but I'd also consider any locations where you might have childcare or associated family needs that wouldn't just be outright a preschool. I don't know, there's not as many places in Petaluma that have that consideration, but the few that are, I could see that being very important. And then outside of that, with the toolkit, I think putting that out there as quickly and as often as possible is going to be really important, because considering that the comment on like one neighbor wants one thing, one person wants another, I think you're going to run into a lot of situations where both people want the same thing and they just don't realize the term they're using. So having that like visual glossary is going to be really critical. And beyond that, I would just say keeping this being like a solely service-focused program and then growing it over time, I think is going to be not only important for making this a success, but it'll be one of those few things we can do as a city where people just see the immediate benefit of it, or relatively immediate benefit of it. So thank you for bringing this back to us.
I just have one comment, kind of similar to as we're talking about glossaries or documents to help make what we're talking about, the solutions, more relatable to folks. I would also say in the issues observed on the nomination form, not everyone might know what obstructed sightlines means. So if you could do like a little eye for like info, and they could hover over it and it just kind of explains what that means. So, or they might not know there's a California law and you have to give 3 feet to a cyclist when you're passing them. So just a little blurb on the form, if it could be integrated, I think that'd be great.
I think this is really great for the city and hopefully for staff, and equally as great for our constituents. I feel like the current way, there isn't a current process in place, and so people are left feeling like frustrated, or I sent an email and I haven't heard back, or communication falls off, and there isn't a way to prioritize things. So I think just the structure will be make everybody's job easier and make people feel heard and know that they're somewhere in this ethereal queue and that their project scores somewhere. And I think that's really just important to have for this. I just feel like this function is really valuable. And I think that it would be worthwhile to bring it back to PBAC once it gets going, and we can, revise it as needed. It can be fluid, because I think it has a lot of opportunity. I am still gonna push for a real quick build program at some point in time. I think this is a great place to start, but I envision that the timeline will still be lengthy, which is okay, but I think there's a way to do things quickly also, and not costly. So I think that this is a good step in the right direction for us. Thank you.
I just make one comment, and I hope it's actually correct, and maybe it's half of a question, half of a comment. So I don't know about the other members of this committee, but I regularly have friends tell me about problems that are automobile problems. Like, I wish I could see around this corner, and why aren't you doing something? I'm like, talk to the city. Is this considered to be a project that also, if this is really meant for pedestrians and bicycles and non-motor users of the streets, then would people be redirected to another department, or is that really not its purpose? Its purpose is general traffic.
Yeah, all safety for all road users, including people driving.
Okay.
And I mean, the example you give, that's something that's very easy to address by
Gossage
prohibiting
coming on
parking
to Petaluma.
near
Never
intersections,
mind.
right? Put a red curb in 20 to 30 feet, and now you've opened up that sight distance. Or if we find that there's a hedge or a tree blocking sight at an intersection, we can send out code enforcement to tell people to, maintain their landscaping. So, yeah, and that's really what I was trying to convey too, is that if we hear of an immediate hazard, something that can be easily addressed, we don't need to send someone through this whole process and have them wait. We'll send that over to the appropriate city team to take care of and deliver immediate results in those cases.
All right. So I guess my only comment would be sort of related to questions about follow-on. Maybe there should be a checkbox saying, do you want to hear about what happened to this suggestion? And then people could supply a return address, but that wouldn't be required. I don't know if that was part of the plan.
Yeah, I mean, just please contact me for updates on this request, right?
Yeah. More or less like what you would do on a social media post.
Yeah,
right?
when they submit the application, like, yes, I want to be contacted, or no, I threw this out there and I never want to hear about it again. I did my part. Yeah, and I think that's helpful.
Awesome. I'm really excited about this, Bjorn. I think it's really thoughtful. On the criteria, something about speed and cost and community support. I know you mentioned it, but I do think community support, especially for more challenging things, it's going to contribute to the speed. It's going to contribute to the cost to be able to move it through. In terms of other sort of sensitive scenarios like schools and parks, I build on what Mr. Hooper said and add deed restricted affordable housing and then transit stops. I think transit stops are sort of a unique area where we can make them, there's just a lot of benefit there. And mobile home parks I would throw in there as well. I think your form questions are good. I did a survey a while back, and it takes time to read, but more open text, allowing people to describe the situation. It helped a lot for like understanding the sort of scenario in the story, other than just like speeding. Sometimes it's like the time of day, or it's like over by St. Vincent's High School. There's it's like obviously there's a time of day when it's just really bad and people are complaining about it. But it also really helped to capture the attention of people inside of City Hall. And this was before you were here, but when I shared the results, the city attorney contacted me pretty quickly because there's a lot of, you're taking away the whatever it's called. You just are increasing liability, and that gets you attention and can help really push this through if there's things like that. So I would encourage more open text fields. I think we have to allow people to request things like trees, beautification, things like that. Like daylighting is great. There was an intersection I saw recently where you painted it red and it was for daylighting purposes, but then it's just like painted red and we just took away parking. And if we can allow people to put a planter box there, then it becomes like a victory garden, right? Or something like that. And so we can, you're giving people things in addition to making it safer. So I think allowing people to request trees and paint and beautification is good. Really like the toolkit idea. I think my head was going right where Blake's head was at with the case studies, testimonials before and after. The toolkit, I didn't immediately see it when I read it in here, but the idea of having local examples, and I think that's just all the more reason to like have really, really badass, early local examples. So, like get that traffic circle painted in the center by kids and have the picture with kids painting it, and then, like ask people if they want one, and I guarantee you people will be, barking for them. I think there's some interesting opportunities with bundling here too, and I don't know whether it comes through this, but like the city of Emeryville, they set a goal to like put seating at every bus stop in Emeryville, and they did it in 1 year. And I feel like there's some cool opportunities for that too, where it's like we're going to do 15 neighborhood traffic circles or bus stop seating everywhere. There's just amenities like that I think would be great. And I mean, I just keep hunkering back on just working with partners too. Just keep working with partners and the comms team and everybody. They're going to be the real allies and heroes in this. And then one question that I do think you should add, and the chair was asking about this, is just like, are you willing to help educate your neighbors? And it could be just yes, no, maybe. But that can be really helpful to have a local voice and just a trusted voice, and like they're not yelling at you, right? They're yelling at their neighbor who just wants it to be safer for their kids, and so if you can find people who are willing to stick their neck out there for you, it can create some good case studies too. Awesome, thank you.
Great. Well, I hope that was helpful feedback for you, Bjorn, and we
Very
look
helpful.
forward to seeing the next iteration of this
Sorry,
project.
one more comment. Sorry.
Okay.
If we know population density, that might be a way, another criteria for like large apartment buildings. I'm thinking some of the areas over by like out Lakeville and like, just the number of people that are going to be entering and exiting a certain area. There might be some way to factor that into the criteria.
Yeah, we did. We previously had traffic volume in the criteria when we shared it with, or as a possible or potential criteria when we shared it with you in January, and then kind of came to think over time that the collisions and collision history and the speed survey would sort of serve as a proxy for activity in the area. But yeah, we can take a look at, there was a lot of criteria called out here tonight between transit, affordable housing, now density, that we could potentially add to the multiplier list for consideration. Yeah, so that's helpful.
Patricia, you had something?
So my question is, where is this going? Is it on the city app? So if I open the city app, do I push new request? Is that where it is? And then it's going to be at the top of the list as opposed to water, streets, storm drains, parks, blah, blah, blah? Is that where it's going to be, or is it going to be its whole nother city app?
That would be great. I'll have to explore that with our the folks who manage that app and see what we can, if we can add it in there, or if it needs to be its own sort of standalone request type. So,
'Cause that's
TBD.
the whole idea of adding the extra box at the end. Is there anything else, right? So if it's already on this one city app, right, that's
Yeah.
functional, and you're already set up to answer questions when we do put in a request for something, right? So,
Yeah.
and it could be at the top of the list of safe streets, right? So,
Yeah, no, it's a great suggestion, and hopefully we can make it work.
Okay, great. We will close out this item and we'll move on to committee comment. Please keep your updates brief as it's after 9. But we look forward to hearing, and we're losing members of the public. So, Councilman Barnacle, we can start with you and go down the row.
Yeah, we had a council meeting on Monday. It was there was one real item. It was the workshop item to basically give input on direction on updating our mobile home park ordinance. Last time it was updated in 1994, so it's out of date. And we're excited to see that come back and updated. Hearing the street designs were updated in 1996 made me think of maybe time to update them as well. And then final thing kind of ties in with some of this stuff, but I was walking down here today and Bodega Avenue could really use some crosswalks or something at Upham and or Baker or something like that. There's just a lot of people that travel across that street.
Kevin, do you have anything you want to share? If not, we'll keep on moving.
Only what you might share yourself, which is that it's Patricia's last meeting, I think. And congrats for your survival, and thank you for your service.
Now that everything's getting done.
Great. I just have a couple things to share. Yes, I was going to just say thank you to, yes, your service, Patricia. And then there are others that terms are also expiring. I don't know if folks are planning to reapply. But thank you all for your service on PBAC. If you're not coming back to us at our next meeting, this work wouldn't be getting done without the support of everyone on this committee. So just thank you so much for your time. It's a lot of time. And then on that note, it is a lot of time. I have made the decision I will be stepping down as chair for this next year. I have one more year left in my term and absolutely plan to stay on the committee. I would love to be considered for vice chair if the committee wanted to do that. But with my current work schedule, it's been a little bit much for me over the past year, though I love sitting up here with you all and leading you through these meetings. So thank you for giving me the honor of doing that. I really appreciate it. But I wanted to let everyone know in case people wanted to think, would they be a good chair by the next time we have our meeting? And my last update, I attended Petaluma's age-friendly session last Friday. It was a great turnout, so many different stakeholders throughout the community. I was there as a member of PBAC. A lot of stuff around, bike and ped came up. Definitely heard a lot from, older adult perspectives around biking and how their perspective sometimes, as we're adding bike infrastructure, it can make it harder, or it seems harder for them to walk or get in and out of cars. And so it's just interesting perspectives and good things to keep in mind as we're designing bike infrastructure, that we're not making it harder for another group. How can we do well for everyone? And so encourage all of us in the city to keep that in mind. And that's it.
There was no coinciding updates from Parks and Recreation. It was all turf all night. I do believe this is going to be my last meeting here. I think that I will be reappointed. So it has been great. I've really enjoyed it. But I do think, because I think the way the calendar falls. So either I'll be here one more time or I'm out. But thank you. This has been awesome. I've learned a lot.
This is a lot of loss in one night. I'll keep my update brief. Our last planning commission meeting had nothing to do with PBAC. It was a floodway meeting about a floodway project, and I'll leave it at that. And in our next planning commission meeting, and this will have something to relate, we're going to have our joint meeting with Historic and Cultural Preservation to do a study session on the hotel project for downtown. So I predict that will be a lovely and long meeting. And I wanted to both thank our now outgoing chair for bringing an incredible amount of order to these meetings. Not that they weren't lovely before, but a productive, real focus to these meetings. And I also wanted to thank you as well for all of the time that you've put into this body. I remember when I first joined, You answered a lot of questions, a lot of silly questions that I asked in several of the first few meetings, and you're very kind to me. And I hope you'll still be around because your passion through all of this work has always been incredibly clear. So, and I'll also say, I know we weren't on the committee together for very long, but thank you for everything. And that's it.
Okay. First, I'd like to put in a quick plug for Sonoma County Bike Coalition. I got an email from them earlier today. They're looking for volunteers for bike valet. They're having some sort of musical event up at Railroad Square Saturday. And then later in the month, they have the Biker Chicks, where all women are invited. They've got numerous rides. Anyway, it's a good source for a lot of information, Sonoma County Bike Coalition. And then I would like to thank Chair Bond for your wonderful service. I appreciate it very much. You ran a very good meeting, all meetings, and a lot of good comments, a lot of good information. So thank you very much for what you've done. And Patricia, thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Us W's have to stick together. So, and this will be my last meeting too. I have not reapplied to be on the committee. So I enjoyed it, and I think I leave it in good hands. So good luck to you, and thank you, Stacy. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Well, I don't feel so bad anymore because, but, it's been very interesting through the years to see how this group has been strong and gotten things done, even though 10 years ago we couldn't, anyway. So the future is there for us now, and I hope that the next group of committee members will be just as productive as we have been. And I thank those that are leaving with me, right? Jerry and Stacy, and Kelly's not leaving, she's just stepping down a little, sideware stepping. So yeah, it's a great thing to be able to participate in a city and where you want to. So I think we're all enjoying it. And so that's what the passion is. Good. So just keep it up. Even the help, sorry, not the hired help, but the help, right, keeps us in track, and I appreciate that. And it's all learning for us. So it was wonderful, and I enjoyed it. And so I'll miss you, but I'll see you around. So keep it going. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for all those tearful goodbyes here. Okay, with that, I'll close out committee comment and we'll move on to staff comment. Last thing on our agenda. Bjorn, you can take it away.
All right, thank you. And wow, it's, we are going to have a new look committee come next month. Thank you to all of you for your service, and especially Patricia, you were on the committee when I joined the committee, so we've come full circle. So yeah, thank you all for many long nights. I know you're doing this as volunteers because this is what you're passionate about. So the city greatly appreciates your service. With that, staff comments, several updates. First off, a great picture of our Bike to Wherever Day Energizer station. Patricia rocking her T-Rex or her dinosaur bike shirt, and we just barely avoided a quorum over there on Lynch Creek Trail. We had several members show up. Luckily, we never had 5 or more, and it was a great morning, handing out goodies and seeing all the folks bike by. My takeaways being out there that morning. And I don't know about you all, a lot of e-bikes. I feel like we had more e-bikes than we did non-e-bikes, and a handful of electric scooters using Lynch Creek Trail. A lot of people seemed like they were in a hurry to get to work. Didn't necessarily want to stop by and talk to us. And yeah, also just seeing the different ways people navigate that Lynch Creek Trail crossing at North McDowell, which could definitely use some improvement. Not everyone's going down to the signal and using the signal, so need to find a solution there. Alrighty, several updates, starting with the most exciting update. I had to throw this in last minute. Got a call from Jeff at Fair and Piers. The interactive map for the active transportation plan will be up next week, possibly even by the end of this week, for public review and feedback. And just as a reminder, that'll have our existing bike network along with our newly proposed bike network. So this is the culmination of all of the feedback that you all gave Jeff over the last year plus. We've got new dotted lines on the maps. We've got protected bike lanes. It'll be very exciting, and looking forward to getting a lot of feedback on the plan as it moves forward for public feedback public review this summer. I'll be sure to get the word out to you all, and we'll be getting the word out through all the city channels as well. Caulfield Bridge, at City Council's May 15th meeting, they authorized the city manager to approve our agreement for all of the work needed to make that project shovel ready. So that's all design, environmental, permitting. So that's really exciting. The D Street traffic calming and active transportation quick build. I think we had just had we had a community workshop prior to the last PBAC meeting, and we published another survey for that project. We received we received double the responses we received from our first survey. So we got 260 responses. We're sorting through all that data and feedback we've received. We've gotten a lot of emails. And so we've got a lot to sort through over the next couple of weeks. And then we'll be kind of putting out a summary of everything we've heard and proposed next steps for that project. And it's linked to, as far as construction goes, it is linked to the 5th Street neighborhood greenway. And Garfield Drive, they got started on that, I believe, this week or last. They are flying through with the curb ramps. They're doing, I believe, about 3 or 4 curb ramps a day right now out on Garfield. And so the paving, once they complete all that concrete work, the paving will start. And we are planning to incorporate, we're going to have to do a change order for that project to add Class 3 bikeway signage and markings, and also add some traffic calming elements near Arroyo Park. And then Maria Drive, we presented on that at our last meeting. We are getting close to finishing with the design work there, and that would go to bid later this summer. North McDowell Complete Streets continues they are very close to being done with their concrete and utility work, and paving is expected to start, I believe, next week or the week after on that project. So that's exciting. We do still need to go back to council with an update on the project, including some additional data and staff recommendations on the striping and the roadway configuration and other traffic-related elements of the project. And then lastly, the Rainier Avenue traffic calming project, demonstration project. We are still compiling all that data feedback we've received, and we'll be sharing that as well as next steps in the coming weeks. So we've got a lot to sort through between that and D Street right now. Grant updates. The SCTA Board of Directors approved the Transportation Fund for Clean Air project list, and that included our request for just under $90,000 for traffic calming and active transportation improvements on Windsor Drive and Sunny Slope Avenue. And then we just heard today, or late last week, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission is recommending our downtown area parking management study and grant for funding, and that would be approved, is expected to be approved by the MTC board or the MTC Commission later this month. So that's very exciting. New interactive bike map is up on the city's website. This is different from what Fair and Piers is producing. This is shows a live view of our existing bike network and as well as the proposed projects from our last bike plan. So from 2008, anything that hasn't been implemented is still showing in this as a proposed project. We did also add in school and park layers to this so people can see the connections there, and would appreciate if you can help spread the word about this. So there's a link there, cityofpetaluma.org/bike map. It'll redirect you to this page that lives within ArcGIS. But also would love if you see any edits that are needed. If you see something that looks wrong, let me know. We'll make those changes. And that would be really helpful, as well as any feedback on the map interface, symbology, anything to just improve this. So would appreciate that. Announcements. SMART is just put out a wayfinding plan survey. So they're beginning to explore adding wayfinding signage to their trail system. And that's their first outreach on that effort is this survey. And then a reminder that Sonoma County Safe Routes to Schools survey is also still active. I think I've shared with you all that that's a really great survey that will not only inform their programming efforts at Sonoma County schools, but will also inform our efforts around safety improvements near schools. And then lastly, our upcoming agenda list. So with our several new members at next month's meeting, there'll be an opportunity to appoint a new chair and vice chair, possibly appoint a SCTA countywide BPAC liaison. So again, continue to think about that for you returning members if that's something you're interested in. We could talk about establishing new ad hoc committees. I know it seems like everyone had a really positive experience with the last round, and so I'm sure we can tackle some more really meaningful efforts through this committee. We've also got a few items there that I'm not supposed to attach dates to these because that's considered noticing, but we would love to share the City Thread Accelerated Mobility Playbook. They just shared their final report with us. So we'll bring that to the committee for, it's a great presentation on some of the challenges the city faces when it comes to implementing transportation projects and how to overcome those. And then conversations about Safe Routes to Schools Task Force, an update on Vision Zero. That was really a follow-up out of the Vision Zero ad hoc committee. And then lastly, an invitation to SMART to come present on the McDowell Crossing and any pathway updates they have to share. And that reminds me, in case you haven't seen, they're nearing completion of the new pathway segment between Lakeville and Payran. It's paved. They're currently putting in the fencing, and then I think the last thing they need to do is install access improvements or install a crossing at the Payran intersection for a trail crossing. So that's it for me. Happy to take clarifying questions.
Okay,
Thanks.
Kevin, go ahead.
Just a couple of questions about the bike map, because you risked showing the URL to me and I had to look at it right away. So a couple of the proposed trails are outside the city limit. Would those be administered by the city, or would those be administered by the county?
Yeah, any facilities that are not on city right-of-way need to be done by partner agencies. So those are generally the county, although...
Okay. I wasn't sure because I know there's not indicated here also is like the sort of urban growth boundary.
We've
So I
got
didn't
the
know if those
s-
were inside and therefore.
We've
like,
got the
something
city
that we would deal
limits
with.
showing on this map, actually. So, but if you ever have a question about a project that, whether it's city or county, you can reach out and we can let you
Okay,
know.
yeah, I guess I was just wondering in terms of communication to folks.
Yeah,
It was
and
like,
that's-
oh, is this something that the city is going to do or something that the county is going to do?
Yeah, that's actually a important, so the county is actually about to embark on their countywide active transportation plan update as well. So we'll be bringing updates to this committee, and especially as that pertains to our city-county roads, right? We're ahead of them, so that's great because we can sort of set our vision for some of those, for the city portions of some of those streets. The best example of a city-county street that kind of goes back and forth is Petaluma Boulevard North. So we can establish our vision through our active transportation plan and then hope that they follow our lead with their plan.
A sort of related question in terms of jurisdiction, and this is just me, my own ignorance. But so SMART is working on the connector from Lakeville to Payron, but will the city be responsible for maintenance thereafter, or will SMART handle that?
No, Smart's generally responsible for maintenance on all of their trail segments, and I believe that one would be the same.
Bjorn, can I ask, do you know where the crossing will go on Payran?
I can follow up on that. I haven't actually seen the design myself, so yeah.
Yeah, because there's
Follow up on
like a separator.
Yeah, there's a median that would
Median.
need to be altered.
And then
Yeah.
one other thing about that entrance going towards Lakeville, on the Lakeville side of Payran, is like there's that police annex building, which is set back, and the curb goes there, the sidewalk goes along that building. And then you have to walk like about 15 feet like towards Lucky's to get onto the path from the entrance. But you could, and people probably will, just walk off of the sidewalk into that like dirt to get onto the trail, just to cut that corner. So I don't know if that could be an improvement or a suggestion to them.
Yeah, we could look at the property ownership and what could be done there to, yeah.
It would honestly
Yeah.
be a much easier like ADA access point too than making that like 90-degree turn onto the trail.
Cool. Thank you.
Patricia and then Blake.
Can we call it a bike ped map and not just a bike map, please?
We could, but it's I suppose because it has trails, it's multi, yes. But it is much more of a bike map because that's what the on-street, yeah. Yeah. Okay. It doesn't have sidewalks or other pedestrian data showing, so, yeah. Okay. We'll call it active transportation map,
Skateboard
just to continue using the same catch-all, yeah.
Oh, really excited to hear about the recommendation for the parking study for downtown. If it does get approved, how long until it gets going?
I believe the turnaround on that was pretty quick for when they would fund it, or when the funding would be available to us. And yeah, so I can't confirm a date, but I think my recollection is that it's a pretty quick turnaround. Sometimes there's with the Safe Streets for All grant, it's a 9-month lag between award and actual funding being available. I think this one is a couple of months, maybe.
Oh, no, I'm glad. I was only asking because it seems like good timing with general plan process.
Definitely, yes. There are a lot of conversations and planning efforts that will really benefit from that exercise, yeah.
Councilman Barnacle?
I would just advocate for the ad hocs to come back sooner rather than later with the new folks.
Great. And Bjorn, were you going to ask about the July meeting, folks' availability?
Thank you. Yeah, we wanted to take a quick straw poll of availability for the July meeting from those of you who are returning, which I'm realizing now that it's potentially very few of you. It's July 5th, so it's the day after the 4th of July. And I personally will not, I'm going on vacation, so the meeting, if it is held, it will be staffed by a different liaison.
So we just go down the,
Sure.
so if you're staying on, if you'll be here for the July meeting, okay, thumbs up.
My seat's up, but if I'm readmitted, I'm a thumbs up.
I am not available. So it looks like it's just me of the people that are coming back or possibly coming back if they're reappointed.
All
Okay.
right, thank you.
Great.
We'll probably follow up with an email later in the month once we have the new membership confirmed, asking for people's availability.
Great. Okay. Well,
I'm just
One
going to
more
make
thing?
a silly statement and saying, it's the only way to scare off new committee members is telling them the first meeting is canceled. I'll just say that as a silly statement.
We could also look for other dates later in the month. It's an option.
okay, well, with that, we will adjourn this meeting at 9:32. Thank you.